Welcome to our Lakeshore Christian Church Midweek podcast. I'm Pastor Randy Cordell. We're coming to you live from our studio at our Antioch campus here in beautiful Nashville, Tennessee. We're glad to have you joining us today. If you haven't already done so, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and invite others to do so as well. We come to you live at noon on Wednesdays, and then once it's posted after that, you can listen to it anytime on most popular podcast platforms. Each week on the podcast, we normally spend some time looking at the message series that we're in here at Lakeshore. This past week, I had a special guest in as well. If you missed that podcast, I really want to encourage you to go back and catch it because we learned a lot about the work of Creative Vets, and I'd love for you to check that out. Jesse Wayne Taylor was my guest, and he did a great job talking about the good work they do with veterans, especially combat veterans that they're helping with music and arts and other therapies that help them deal with their PTSD and other challenges that they're facing now. So go back and listen to that one if you haven't already, and check out the work of Creative Vets. Well, this is also Juneteenth that we're celebrating today. It is a federal holiday now in the United States, and I was doing a little more research. I had last year at this time, I remember doing some research on this as well, and I wanted to go back and look at it again to be sure I get the facts straight on dates and times that things that happened that we are commemorating on Juneteenth. So I wanted to read to you just a brief history taken off of a website on Black history here in the United States, and it says this: on Freedom's Eve, or the eve of January the 1st, 1863, the first watch night services took place. On that night, enslaved and freed African Americans gathered in churches and private homes all across the country, awaiting news that the Emancipation Proclamation had taken effect. At the stroke of midnight, prayers were answered, and all enslaved people in the Confederate States were declared legally free. Union soldiers, many of whom were black, marched into plantations and across cities in the South, reading small copies of the Emancipation Proclamation, spreading the news of freedom in the Confederate States. But not everyone in Confederate territory would be immediately freed. Even though the Emancipation Proclamation was made effective in 1863, it could not be implemented in places still under Confederate control and places that they had not gotten to yet with their Union troops, as communication was more of a challenge at that time period in the U.S. As a result, in the westernmost Confederate state of Texas, enslaved people would not be free until much later. Freedom finally came on June 19, 1865, when some 2,000 Union troops arrived in Galveston Bay, Texas. The Army announced that the more than 250,000 enslaved black people in the state were free by executive decree. This day came to be known as Juneteenth by the newly freed people in Texas, and has, of course, since then, as I said earlier, now been recognized as a federal holiday here in the U.S., and rightly so. It's a great day to be celebrating the freedom that was finally brought to those people who had been enslaved. When we think about the freedom from slavery, it ties right into the series that we're in Exodus, in the Old Testament book of Exodus, as we look at the nation of Israel, the Israelites who had been captive as slaves in Egypt for hundreds of years, until God appeared to Moses in the burning bush, called him to take his brother Aaron with him and go back to Egypt and go before Pharaoh and demand that he free the people there. And the correlation here to me is a couple of things. One is when God made the decree to Aaron and Moses that the people were going to be freed, that he was going to use them to get Pharaoh to let the people go, and not just let people go, but send them off with all the supplies that they needed as they left Egypt. Well, when God says something, when God makes that proclamation, you can count on it. It's true. It's true when he says it. It's true when he makes it, and he will follow through on it. But the Israelites didn't actually get to enjoy the reality of that freedom until after we go through what we're talking about this coming Sunday, which is the plagues that were brought by God in the nation, in Egypt, so that Pharaoh would finally be willing to let the people go. And so it was a delayed experience for them to be able to enjoy the freedoms that God had said that they were going to have. There are a lot of other correlations as well, like the idea that freedom is not won just by proclaiming. There's effort that has to be done. There's sacrifices that have to be made along the way, and the Israelites were learning that. And just like those that were enslaved in the U.S. had to go through great suffering and great sacrifice, great challenges before they were able to enjoy the freedom that was finally brought about. This past Sunday, we looked at a section in Exodus chapter 6. It's the second half of that chapter, where God takes some time in this chapter to reveal the family record of Moses and Aaron. We talked about why that genealogy happens to appear there. Why did God make sure that genealogy was included? And there are a lot of reasons we talked about. One is for the historical record, to show the historical accuracy of the Scriptures. That's a big part of it. One was to show how God was keeping his promise, that through the lineage he had promised the Messiah was going to come, so he's giving us greater records of that lineage. But I think there was another reason that as I read through these verses, it stood out to me even more, and that is, in the genealogy of Moses and Aaron, we find a listing of people from all different backgrounds, from all different situations in life, some really good people who did a lot of good things, some people you never hear of again after this genealogy, but some people we also have a record of some really bad things that they did and that were involved in along the way. And I love how at the end of that genealogy, he says this in verse 26 and 27. It was this Aaron and Moses to whom the Lord said, "Bring the Israelites out of Egypt by their divisions." They were the ones who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, about bringing the Israelites out of Egypt. This same Moses and Aaron. It is like God is saying, can you believe it? I was able to work through this same Moses and Aaron that you read that genealogy about. You see all the mess of their family history, and yet they were the ones that I picked and that I used to go before Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world at that time, to demand that the Israelites be set free from his rule there in Egypt. And it's like God is showing us, he's reminding us, he's showing Moses and Aaron, he's showing the Israelites, and he's showing all of us since then that when God chooses to work through people, the only people he has to pick from are flawed people. We're all flawed. We're all sinners. We all have some, if you go back far enough in our genealogy, some things that we wouldn't be real happy with. Maybe if we just go back a short time in our own lives, there's some things that we don't necessarily want everybody to know about. So I've always joked about not going too far back in my genealogy because I already know enough about things in my family history that aren't that great. So I don't want to go too far back and dig up even more. But there's also great people in my genealogy that did a lot of good things. So there's a mixture of all of that, and most families are that way. All families have some dysfunction in them, more in others, more in some than others, but all of us have some. And so God doesn't depend on us having a perfect genealogy to use us for his glory. He doesn't depend on us getting everything right all the time. He's bigger than that. He's greater than that. God is able to work through very flawed people and still accomplish his, fulfill his promises and keep all of those things he said was going to happen, that he told Moses and Aaron was going to happen. We're going to see in this series, it happened exactly like God said it was going to happen. And that's true throughout the historical record of God's revealing his plan and his purposes, and then keeping all of those promises and things working exactly the way God said they were going to work. And that should create in us a greater trust, a greater faith and confidence in God and what God promises he's going to do. One of the things we talked about this past Sunday was how in Moses' genealogy, there were these strongholds that we see still prevalent in the human race today, things that we have cycles that are repeated in families oftentimes. Some of those strongholds are things like addictions, alcohol and drug addiction, sexual immorality. We talked about selfishness and apathy, those things that you can see in most every family genealogy. Some of these strongholds are there, and they were for Moses and Aaron too. And yet, with God's help, if you give yourself to him, if you commit your life to him, surrender to him, He can help you break that cycle. You can be the one in your family genealogy, in your family tree, that starts a new cycle of something better for your family. And it doesn't depend on your strength or your perfection. It depends on surrender to God and His strength and His presence and His provision for your life. So we talked about the steps in breaking those cycles, like surrendering to Christ is the first step, coming under His rule and His authority, and then teaching your children what God teaches about life and how life is supposed to work, because the cycle is not broken if it just stops with us. We have to pour those teachings into our children, those coming behind us, our children and our grandchildren, so the cycle continues to be broken in that next generation that's coming along behind us. We talked about how part of breaking that cycle is setting the example of serving others. Jesus said, "I did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give my life as a ransom for many." So if we're going to grow up to be like Jesus and start a new cycle of people that are going to follow Jesus and honor Him, then they need to see us serving others the way Jesus did. And then, of course, we break that cycle by making it our focus. Our highest calling is to advance the kingdom of God. It's to carry out the great commission that God has given us. Moses and Aaron were given a mission to accomplish, to go before Pharaoh on behalf of God's people. And they were breaking a cycle of hundreds of years of disobedience and rebellion of God's people. And so they were going to set a new cycle, a new example, a new revelation of what God is doing in His plan to redeem His people. And if they could see Moses and Aaron doing that, if they could see them having the boldness to go before Pharaoh and God being faithful to them when they were obedient to Him, then that could break a cycle of disobedience and rebellion in the life history of the Israelites. And now God wants us, this generation of human beings, of Christ followers, to be those people that step up to God's call in our lives, to break those cycles and start new cycles, better cycles of following the teachings of Jesus Christ, being obedient to Him, and helping others come to know and follow Jesus. So if you missed last week, you could go back and catch it on our YouTube channel. We'd love for you to do that. We archive all of our messages there at our YouTube channel. So we want you to be able to catch any that you might miss there. This coming Sunday, we're going to continue in the book of Exodus, and we're going to start into Exodus chapter 7. And this is an interesting part of the Exodus narrative. This is something that has always intrigued me on how God did this. Exodus chapter 7, beginning with verse 14, we see the beginning of God bringing the plagues to Egypt to show Pharaoh that he is really the true God who is in authority and in power. It's in response to something Pharaoh says way back in Exodus chapter 5 and verse 2. Moses and Aaron first go before Pharaoh and say, God has spoken to us and He wants you to set us free so that we can go and worship and honor Him. And Pharaoh says this, "Who is the Lord that I should obey Him?" I don't know this God you're talking about. Now, Egypt had a lot of gods, and Pharaoh saw himself as a god. And so he says, I know about all these other gods, but I don't know your God. They weren't even upset that the Israelites had their own God, as long as they didn't try to claim that their God was the God, the supreme ruler. And now Moses and Aaron are presenting their God as the supreme God, the ruler that Pharaoh should submit to. And Pharaoh's saying, who is your God? So this coming Sunday, as we look at the beginning of the plagues, we're going to look at the first three, the blood, frogs, and the gnats, those first three plagues, where God is answering that question to Pharaoh, who is this God? He's going to show them, he's going to show Pharaoh and all of Egypt and all of his people, the Israelites, that the Egyptian gods had no power or authority over him as God. So we're going to see that in the first three plagues, how God is answering that question. And over the next couple of weeks, we'll look at the other plagues as well. We're going to take one Sunday just to look at the final plague, the 10th, with the Passover, and spend some time with that. So we hope that you can join us as we look at God answering that question, who is the Lord that I should serve Him? And we're going to see that He's actually our King, and that God's people are our family, and God's mission is truly our purpose. So I hope that you can join us this coming Sunday. We have services at our Antioch campus at 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. We have services at the Smyrna campus at 10 a.m. And we live stream our services every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. So if you can't be with us in person, we'd love for you to join us for the live stream. But if you can't be here in person, we'd love to see you here at any of those service times at either campus. I wanted to let you know about something that we have coming up too for our Lakeshore family, to mark your calendars for this. We have scheduled again a summer celebration for August the 17th. That's a Saturday. It's going to be from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. We've done this the last few years out at Camp YI, and we're going to do that again at that camp. We'll be having our registration up and ready to go. It's on our website at lakeshorechristian.com, so you can go ahead and register. It's $5 per person, and children 5 and under is no charge for them. We got lots of fun activities we'll be doing out there. The swimming pool will be open. We'll have a water slide. We'll have an opportunity for you to fish, lots of games that you can play, and we'll finish out the evening with dinner there in the dining hall at the camp and a devotion time there. So we want you to register in advance. We need to get a good, accurate count of how many people are coming and make preparations for that. And we'd love for you and your family to join us for that summer celebration at Camp YI. We also have life groups that we meet during the week at different locations. If you're not already connected to a life group, they get together and do life together. They do Bible study together, pray together. They do a lot of different service projects together, a lot of different things. And those life groups are important for you to be more connected and involved in your church family. So if you're not already connected to a life group, go to our website at lakeshorechristian.com and click on that life group graphic and give us your information, and then someone will follow up with you. We have some new groups that will be starting this fall. Some of our groups take a break for the summer, but we have some that are still meeting through the summer, and we'll be glad to help you get connected to a group as soon as we have something that's available for you that works with your time and schedule so that you can be part of one of those groups. We want you to also know that when we are celebrating different things here at Lakeshore, or offering different activities or programs, you can always find out more at our website, and we also post on social media. Primarily, we post on Facebook and Instagram, so we hope that you'll check regularly there and follow us on those social media sites so that you can keep up with everything that's going on. We are glad that you've joined us here today. We hope that you'll continue to connect and grow and serve with us here at Lakeshore Christian Church.